and the 7 Gen Indigenous Youth Council has helped work. What have you found, like what skills
of small-scale clean energy projects, which by no means means that that's math, or if it's engineering, or if it is necessary in the energy transition, then we're really getting the opportunity to create our own chances and to create our own new projects that are going to create a lot of change for our communities. And so what I'm seeing is, in this sector, whatever you're...
I wanted to highlight how what I've learned over my course of education was that education is our new bison. And, you know, that's an important saying to try to understand. And everybody's going to understand it differently because they all have different backgrounds. But for me, I'm sitting here on the hide of a bison with a bison skull in front of me, and you know, I'm surrounded by educated people who are looking to inspire you, looking to, you know, make a change for you. And you know, I think that if I can encourage anything right now, it's to stay in school and to get your education. I myself, I didn't see myself in this sector. I didn't technically study STEM. And so I feel like, you know, these spaces, even though you aren't studying science, are still available, and there's still plenty of opportunities for you to take advantage of. As young people, you know, there's people out here like us here on stage that want to encourage and empower and give you those opportunities. And so with that being said, I just, you know, wanted to share that moment of reflection that I had here. Exit.
Wow, young elder, young mushum over here. You know, I think when we think about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, I think one thing too to consider, and you kind of sparked this in my mind, Cal, is like I think our people were original scientists, right? And I think that we continue to be. I look at people like my dad, who is like out in the bush all the time. He gets emails or calls, and people are just like, what the heck? Why can't I get a hold of this guy? It's like, because he's living with the land. His days, his schedule, his agenda is determined by the weather. His agenda is determined by the wind, by the rain, by the sun, you know? And that's based off of observation, and that is science. That's originally what science is like founded on, is observation. And you know, so I think that's something for us to all remember, is like, you know, people that come from the land, our teachings come from the land, that we are scientists. And so I hope that you do find a place in this like ideology of what STEM is and how it can impact your life, and like find a connecting piece. So Cal, I'm gonna come back to you. How has your culture, your identity as an Indigenous person, how has that knowledge helped you in your work? And can you share like a specific story or a moment where it really hit for you?
Yeah, for sure. So I would definitely say like the starting of my project started from something that was a cultural event. I was actually at a round dance, and I ran into Aubrey. And Aubrey, you know, bumped my shoulder, and we got into a conversation about, you know, the program that she's directing and managing. And that was the opportunity for me to start thinking about how I could create some sort of clean energy project. And, you know, like by connecting with my culture, I was able to find a different segue into another sector, you know, and that was clean energy. And so it was a powerful moment for me because, you know, like there was the sound of the drum and, you know, that connection to my people in that space. And so, you know, to find that connection there and to, you know, utilize the opportunity that was given to me to get into the clean energy, I thought, you know, wow, what a wow moment for me to just, it was because I was at a cultural event, you know, it was because I was connecting with my people that I have this opportunity now. And so I'm very grateful for that. And, you know, I think that connecting with your culture, even reconnecting with your culture, if you haven't been, you know, as in touch before is really important. And I always encourage that.
Can I just add?
Absolutely.
Pardon me. I really appreciate the Indigenous entrepreneurship. And I also think that the young youth in this room need to take a lesson from this gentleman, this lady, these ladies here, that there's so much opportunity out there. Again, I come back to the 7 generations. This is the first opportunity where First Nations are truly empowered to be successful in the world, so to speak, I believe. There's been possibilities before, but it's truly with the Duty Consultant, Truth and Reconciliation, you can take advantage of this to build new businesses and bring, the businesses are clamoring for Indigenous understanding, to bring Indigenous understanding and culture to major infrastructure projects moving forward. And you could take advantage of that and build businesses yourself.
No, I think that's great advice, and I think you brought up an important piece as young people in this space is asking questions. I think you said informed consent, and if anybody's familiar with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, it's kind of like a unifying understanding of ways to do things better when it comes to business and industry and all of these things. And one of the guiding principles that I often look to is free, prior, informed consent. Some people you might hear like FPIC. And I think you have an opportunity right now to get informed, right? And ask questions. And I think maybe that's kind of some of the ways that your work has started, right? Aubrey-Anne, you said, people ask the right questions. So I'm just I don't think we have like too much time, but I just want to go to each of you and just like, what is your advice for young people that are interested in coming into this space? Because I feel like when I started my journey in the energy sector, like I was working in like a whole different field. And I was like, okay, what is the root cause of what's happening that's like making people sick in our communities, and how can I change that? And that kind of led me to this thing where it's like, okay, you can create big change if you look at the energy sector, right? And that's what led me here. But advice for people coming into this space, because I know when I stepped into it, I had no idea what was going on. It was very scary. And it wasn't a field that I ever thought I would be working in. I know for me, it was just, asking a lot of questions and just kind of being fearless and open-minded. What would you say your advice to folks would be, Aubrey-Anne?
Yeah, I would say, I didn't start in the energy sector either. I grew up with really great parents who encouraged me to do whatever I wanted, and I wanted to be like this big businesswoman. Like that was like my end goal. That was the main thing I wanted to do, and so I ultimately went into finance. And I thought that that's what was going to get me to that point. And what I quickly realized is I actually just walked into the wrong conference one day. And I went to the Indigenous Clean Energy Gathering. And it was actually Jordan and Chris Henderson who were like, just stay. Like, don't leave. Don't go back to your conference. And I just stayed at the ice gathering, and since then I have never ever left the sector. And what I really think that was I think that was the Creator showing me that the path that I was on was driven by a need to be high up in industry. It was a need for wanting to be the best in a space. It was a need for looking at profit over community. And what I quickly found was that I was very humbled in the Indigenous clean energy space by the fact that it's not about that stuff. It's about how well you're connected to your community. It's about if you're guided by the weather. It's about if you're going to ceremony and how you can best apply that. And so my advice to you, it would be get as connected as you can to your culture, and it's what's going to drive you into the path that you need. And you're going to hear tons of information on different energy routes that are available. And I would tell you, always ask questions, always do your research, and always do what aligns best with your values and your opinions, because you're going to hear a ton of different opportunities, whether it be oil and gas, whether it be nuclear, whether it be solar or wind. And what I honestly tell you is go to ceremony, talk to your elders, and see which of those actually align with who you are as an Indigenous person and who we are, and what, even if it's creating generations of opportunities, what you're going to be proud to say that you did for our other living relatives on the land, for the land itself, and for our people moving forward into the future. Because no matter what we do, all of these different energy routes have pros and cons, and we need to find the ones that best align with who we are and make us proud of people to be leading projects like that.
Wow. Thank you for that advice. I'm going to put that in my pocket. Okay. Young elder here.
It's a tough act to follow. Okay, my advice is pretty simple. I want to keep it simple. If you have a love for the language and the land, there's a spot for you in the clean energy sector. You know, they say that I've said it before that language and land are like peanut butter and jam, or as Sheldon likes to say, neck bones and potatoes. So if you have an appreciation of the land, and you know, if you're thinking about your ancestors and what they thought about and how we're here today, sharing this space, I think that the clean energy sector is for you, because you've already made it here today. You know, you showed interest by as Chief had said earlier, getting on the bus. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you made it, and I hope that, you know, you guys are willing to come have a conversation with me and approach me. Peace and Power is looking for young entrepreneurs, and so there's opportunities there for you if you're interested to come and have a conversation with me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Cal. I've seen Cal speak at an energy conference in Toronto, and he was speaking very proudly his Nihiaowin, his Cree language, and it was beautiful to witness such a young person on stage being able to speak in a way that was like, you know, felt most true to him. And I feel like, you know, you might be feeling similar to how I feel sometimes in these spaces, is like, what does that word mean? You know, what is all this terminology people are using? And sometimes it's actually much more simple than it really sounds. And yeah, being able to speak your language and understand those teachings can kind of like ground you back into that. And so thank you, Cal. I think that's a very important part of things. I was at a language conference, and this guy was like, young people that are speaking your language, just by that exchange of getting to know language, you're getting to know the land, and therefore you are like climate activists just by association of being tied to your language. Mike, advice for the youngins.
Okay, so I'm the old fogey up here, and I'm gonna go all mom and dad on you here. Stay in renewables, but stay in school. Get educated. I remember back when I was young, I quit grade 11 and spun my wheel for 2 years. And I finally got grounded, and I ended up going back to engineering school. It was the best thing I ever did. So don't waste 2 years spinning your wheels. Stay in school, get educated, take advantage of every opportunity you have moving forward.
Great advice. Do folks in the audience have questions? I'm gonna like just not look that way yet, because they're gonna give us a time's up kind of look. No? Questions?
Just raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone over there. Any young people or chaperones or anybody in the room if you have questions.
There's not a ton of time to like actually express how much knowledge that these folks have on stage. So take advantage of that.
Candace has one over there. I've never seen Candace move like that since Tony Cody Games 1993.
I was wondering if you guys had any like summer student positions, and yeah.
Looking for opportunities. Anyone need a summer student? No, I'm just kidding. The question was, do you know of any summer student opportunities?
Yeah, ICE, for example, we take on summer interns every now and then, so I would definitely keep an eye out for Indigenous Clean Energy. There's also tons of different pages like Student Energy or Youth in Climate Action or Indigenous Climate Action. There's lots of pages of actually young Indigenous people who are mobilized in climate work, and if you follow them, they post opportunities all the time. And that can be internships, but it can also be programs like Imagination that exist and can exist for periods of time, and it might not necessarily be a job. But Imagination, for example, gives you project funding to build your project. It gives you wraparound support funds, whether that's for childcare or technology or computer. It gives you funds to do professional development. So there's lots of opportunities out there, and there's jobs, but there's also really cool programs that basically pay you to build a project that you're passionate about. And the cool thing about Imagination too, or even just programs at ICE in general, we don't have any criteria that you need to have any experience in clean energy. The only thing that we have always said we look for is that you're passionate about creating change for your community when it comes to a just transition. So really everyone is eligible.
So hit up Aubrey for a job.
Awesome.
Does anybody
Any
else
other
want to add any of
questions?
that? No?
question back
More
here.
questions, okay.
Sorry. My main question was wondering, you were talking about how language is connected to, there's always a place for, how do I explain it? In your work, and it's connected. But I was wondering in the sense of, if like, say like Cree is, it's not in my traditional household at all. So I'm wondering, how do I go about even learning or connecting to that and without having it around me at all? Like, where would I go to find that?
I know that when I've been working with Saugeen First Nation, I went to the library and they have a connection of elders that work with traditional languages, and that's probably where I would start. And that's where I have started on Six Nations for Mohawk languages and Saugeen for Anishinaabe.
Cal?
That's a great question. You know, I think for myself, you know, it's a oral language, regardless of what it is. So, like, you know, finding a relative, if you could, is probably the best way to go about it. But I'd really like to, have that more of a conversation with you aside from this, just regarding that, for sure.
Honestly, I think just like Cal said, like go to your community events too. Like it is tough. Like I grew up in an urban setting and it was hard sometimes to get to space. But what I often found is like if I just went to like a local round dance and then I would find elders and then just sit and talk with them, like those become your mushums and cookums and they're the ones most wanting to help you. So just do that. Like don't be shy. Like I honestly, sometimes I get in trouble from elders, but my mom says that that's because they love you and they're trying to teach you. So don't be shy and just try to talk to as many people as you can at the things that you do have around you.
Yeah, I think it's building a network too, right? Like you now can look within this room. We're now all your cousins, so you have a much bigger family leaving here today. So you can reach out to folks. I think we often feel like it might be a bother to ask someone for a favor to like help get connected to something. But I think we need to all like open our arms a little bit more and like welcome questions and welcome the opportunity to connect people. I think just finding a community.
Question
Cal?
in back here. Franklin.
Hello. I was just wondering, what are some of the obstacles and challenges that you've had to go through to end up where you are now?
Loaded question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would have never seen myself like in this spot right now 5 years ago. So it's pretty awesome to be here and be able to share my story. And this is a great question to share a little bit about it. So I graduated in 2014 by the skin of my teeth, so like barely. I know it's 24 credits to graduate, and I pretty much had all the other classes. I had 5 classes in grade 12, but I had an outdoor ed class. So outdoor education was a period 4 and 5, and thought it was going to be an easy class, right? And sure enough, I had a teacher who didn't appreciate who I was as an Indigenous student, and so we had a lot of standoff in that class. And I ended up actually almost failing and got to the point where I had to drop out of that class. So I would have graduated with 26 credits, but I ended up dropping those 2 classes, so I barely graduated and got by with 24 credits. And you know, that was a pretty powerful moment where I really didn't feel comfortable at school. And sort of the inspiration as to why I wanted to become a teacher was because I didn't see myself in those positions and in that position at the front of the room, trying to inspire a young Indigenous male to do something with themselves and to do better for themselves, and you know, to change and break those intergenerational traumas that we carry. And so, you know, for me, it's been a long journey. You know, there's been a lot of triumphs and trials that I've had to go through, and it's been, you know, for me, one of the most impactful things was losing my cookum, and you know, during COVID. And so like that was a life-changing moment. You know, it took death to really inspire me to like want to do better for not just myself but my family, my community. You know, you young people, you asking that question, that's a great question to ask. And so it took a lot to get here. And, you know, I believe that you can get here too. And so I'm going to leave it at that. Exe.
I think another thing to add too is whether it's the energy sector or any place that you're going to be in, sadly what we see a lot in our communities is lateral violence that still exists, where we're pinning each other against one another, or we're in arguments because we don't always see eye to eye, or we have this battle of north and south, or who grew up on reserve and who grew up in the city. And that is something that honestly was really hard for me, being in the spaces that I've been in. And it led me down some really not great paths. Like I found myself in relationships of domestic violence. I found myself in friendships that were not always serving me. And I think one day what I really had to do is I went to sweat, and I really tried to work through what that meant. And I tried to get to the point that, you know, I really was like, it can end with me. Just because other people treat me poorly, it doesn't mean I need to treat other people poorly. Just because I've been bad in the past, it doesn't mean I'm bad in the future. Like, you're allowed to change and you're allowed to evolve. And lateral violence doesn't, and just violence in our communities in general, it doesn't have to continue with us. We can be the people who stop it. And what's really gonna happen in any sector, including energy, is if we do break down those types of barriers and we do stop fighting one another, that's what our opponents want. They want us to be divided. They want us to not be together in these movements. But what we can do is we can really unite when we break down those barriers and really become people who are like leading in these sectors and showing that our kinship is at the forefront of everything that we do. And I would say just know that even if you're feeling like you're the only one who's doing that in your community, if you're doing that, you are making a huge change for somebody.
Do you want to add, Mike?
That's tough to follow these two. I would just say again, to echo the sentiment, is my barriers and our barriers is history. And we need to all band together, work together, get educated again to be able to fix the wrongs of the past and move it forward for success for all Indigenous communities.
Great, thank you.
I think we got time for one more question here, Jordan, and I'll turn it to the gentleman.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming out today. In such a westernized world, how did you let your culture really shine through and become not just who you are, but help that in like the world?
So in a Western society, a Western-driven society, how did culture shine through in your work? Great. Who wants to take that one on?
Okay. I always say, and you've probably heard this before, I have my feet in both worlds. I grew up not in the Six Nations First Nation. I grew up in Brantford and dealt with the stigma of being First Nation. But I've lost my train of thought here. I walk in yes, thank you. So I spent 35 years working in business, but I've also spent the last 15 in working with First Nations. And the power and knowledge that I gained and worked the last 15 years has been immense in what I've done over the last 5 and what I'm going to do over the next 15. Being able to bring the Indigenous culture and perspective into the engineering community and into nuclear brings a perspective that non-Indigenous people would never think of, and they don't rightly understand, or some of them don't want to. But they need to understand, they're going to have to understand moving forward, because we need the Indigenous learnings and teachings to build a better future for all of our industries.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, you know, it's a great time to be Indigenous right now. You know, I'm very proud, and I think it's a very cool thing, and, you know, I'm very honored to be able to, you know, be in this space, but also to understand where I come from as a Nehewak, as you know, a Cree person. And, you know, like, in this modern day society, like, we have a lot of advantages and there's a lot of disadvantages as well. So we have to be cognizant of balancing that. And so even when it comes to like who you are and your identity, I think you need to make sure you root yourself there first before you get into something like this. And it'll just flourish from there. And you know, like I've always kind of been proud of the fact that as a Nehiyaw, I've really learned that our people are so resilient, you know, and we come from a long line of great people who've set the stage for us, and here we are. We're able to pick up that torch from them and carry on and continue on. So I would say that, you know, just find a balance, but root yourself in who you are, whether it be, you know, it may not be Nehiyaw, it may not be Cree, but wherever you come from, you know, be proud of that. Root yourself there. Ekse.
Yeah, I think everyone's said really great things. I think for me, I think I saw so many Western structures, and honestly, I think just one day I honestly just got pissed off, and that's what really made me try to lead. And instead of turning that anger into something that harmed me or my communities, it turned into something where I really tried to advocate as much as I could for our communities. And so what that meant is some to the grid or have the transformers that we need that cost an additional millions of dollars to add on to any energy project that we would take part in. And so what it really showed me is that the systems that exist, they may not be made for us to succeed, and they may not be made for us to do well, but if we're rooted in our culture and who we are, we can go into any meeting with any corporate person as long as we have our teachings of who we are as a people. And if we stand grounded in that, that's why we've seen policy changes exist. And we can't lose that, because that's what makes us special, that's what makes us who we are, and it's what makes us the most connected people to the land, to the waters, and to other living relatives. So that always needs to be what we lead with.
Thank you, all of you, for that wonderful perspective. I think I'd like to chime in on that one too, and I think for my own path, I've often felt like intimidated, or you might hear this term like the imposter syndrome. And I think in a world and within systems and organizations, you know, even in school and universities, you know, it can often feel very, like you can feel out of place. And I've felt that so many times. And feel that. That's okay to feel that. And that's okay to not feel like these places are meant for you. But that just like, that discomfort, like Aubrey said, you know, you have an opportunity to decide how you want to channel that. And if you want to channel that into change, not taking no for an answer, and just continue to push, and understanding that, you know, structures were built not in our favor. And I think that's the opportunity that we all have to see change happen, is to continue to push and say, no, I feel like, you know, what my kukum taught me all these years ago, what my Setsuna taught me, that matters. And, you know, that's important. That's the OG scientists that I trust, that I believe in, you know, and like, those conversations, those teachings belong in boardrooms, they belong in spaces like this, they belong in classrooms, they belong in here with us wherever we go. And I think that if you stay tied to that, like they all said, you'll succeed. And so let's give a big round of applause for these wonderful panelists for all the hard work they do. And a big round of applause, clap even louder for yourselves. Come on, you're so deadly. All right, thank you, Ekse.
All right, before you guys jump off stage, we'd like to honor you with some gifts. So we're gonna invite our family up here today to present some gifts to each of you for guiding us and answering all those amazing questions out there from everybody. We really appreciate this panel and Jordan for driving in yesterday to come and lead the panel. You are all leading the way for our future generations. So another round of applause, please, for our panel.
Our panel of First Nations role models. Thank you very much. All right, so on a final picture here, thank you for the questions. What's going to happen here after our little photo here of our group, we're going to go back to our sessions, and we want you to go to another one of our breakout groups, go to another one, don't go to the same one you went to, and that's what we're moving forward in now. Another big round of applause for our panelists here and Jordan Burnoff, the Métis Nation sensation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, so at this moment, we're going to have you stand up again, stretch your legs, head over next door.
Yes.